Hey everybody. So there's a couple things that I didn't mention in this video. Alright, the first thing is you need to unplug your battery. You're going to be pretty close to some hot wires if you don't, and you don't want to short circuit anything. You don't want to get shocked. So disconnect your battery. And something we did that we didn't mention in the video is that we removed the starter and we removed the clutch housing cover, and that made our life a whole lot easier, taking the starter out. And you have to remove the clutch housing cover in order to remove the transmission. And then the last thing is that there's the slave cylinder. So with the slave cylinder, there's a plastic collar that attaches the reservoir down. There's a line that goes from the reservoir down to the slave cylinder, and there you push that plastic collar in. You can just do it with your fingers, and then you wiggle it free, and that's how you disconnect that. You just push the plastic collar in and then wiggle it free. It's not that difficult. So today we're going to learn how to remove the transmission out of a 1998 Chevy S10. First thing we did, remove the gear shift lever. There's a lock nut right here. We took a crescent wrench and we turned the lock nut this way, and then the gear shift lever came off this way. Adapter.
The next thing we did is remove the bolts for the exhaust. There's 3 bolts right there. And then there's 3 bolts up there.
And now there's 4 bolts on the rear of the drive shaft that we're removing. It helps if you have an impact or an electric ratchet to do this quick. See, he removed the first strap, holding on the U-joint. And he removed the second strap holding on the U-joint right there. So now the U-joint, or the drive shaft, is attached at the rear by the U-joint, and those 2 straps that hold the U-joint on. And then at the front, we've got what looks like a slip yoke. So right now, try and pull the drive shaft out of the rear yoke. Yep, so push it forward, get it out of there if you can.
Okay, and now it's going to pull straight out, and got a little bit of leakage going on, but that's okay. And then now we're going to pull this drive shaft out from under the truck once all the drip action goes away. Let me wipe it down.
Next step, we are removing this bracket for the catalytic converter. You see the bolts are on the cross member facing the front of the truck. We're using some ratcheting wrenches because we got it like that. So we got the bolts for that hanger disconnected, and then we removed the bolt attached to the transmission mount right there, and then we use the jack to support the transmission. And now what we're doing is we're taking off the bolts that hold this center cross member in. So this cross member is going to drop down with the jack supporting the transmission, and then we're going to unbolt the bolts that attach the transmission to the engine, and then take the transmission out, replace the clutch.
Okay, so we got the cross member out. We're supporting the transmission with the jack. We lowered the transmission all the way down onto this front cross member up here. The engine is resting, or the engine could rest on that if we needed to for a short period of time. And then we've got the transmission mounting bolts themselves. There's 1, 2, 3 on each side, it looks like. And the special tool that we used to make life easier, well, first we lowered the transmission down as much as we could, and then we have this really long extension. This is the key to the whole thing. Long extension with an 18 mil socket with a swivel head, and it just reaches up in there, and then you're back here with your ratchet and you twist it, and then we're using, once we break it loose, we have an electric ratchet right there, an AC Delco ratchet right there, and then we're about to spin it off and pull this transmission off.
Alright, so we're back here the next day. We got the old slave cylinder slash release bearing out. Okay, it's got a bolt here and a bolt here. Got this one, and then there's another one underneath right there. You see on this old one we had a bunch of fluid, a bunch of brake fluid and stuff leak out. So that's what was causing our problem with the clutch not working. It looks like somebody actually put a new clutch in this truck and did not replace the release bearing and the slave cylinder. So that's why we're having this problem now. So now we're going to go ahead and put her back on that jack right there, and we're going to put it back up. We put the old clutch back in because it was almost brand new, and we replaced the slave cylinder, and we're going to put it all back together now. Alright, so we're back and we got the transmission mounted up. Basically, we've got one bolt in right now. We've got this bolt in right now. That's one mounting bolt. Now, this is the lowest one on the passenger side. On the back side of this, there's a nut and there's some grounds that go on there. So don't forget about the grounds. Also, you've got these two plugs that are part of the wiring harness. So you got to make sure that the wiring harness is draped over the transmission. So like we've got this one that goes right here, and then this one that goes right here, and then looks like a third one that I'm gonna figure out where that goes. So again, there's that. There's that. Oh, and this actually goes to the O2 sensor. So right now what he's doing is he's taking our long extension with the 18 mil and the swivel joint, and he is tightening up the mounting bolts. And what we did, here, just hold on. So what we did to get the transmission actually up is that we had to tilt it like this, okay? And then we moved it forward as much as we could and just got the input shaft. We got the input shaft in as far as we could,
so it was angled a lot like this, and we stabbed it up in there. And you have to do that in order to get the shifter to go up through the hole in the floorboard. So once we got it up there, we just pushed it close and then got it mounted up with the mounting bolts, and it's not too heavy, so 2 guys can move it pretty easy. Okay, so a couple things about the bolts that mount the transmission to the engine. On a 4-cylinder engine, they get torqued down to 29 foot-pounds. On a 6-cylinder engine, they get torqued down to 33 foot-pounds. So once we got the transmission mounted up, we mounted this cross member right here, and then that rests, the transmission rests on the cross member. Right there is the bolt that comes out of the bottom of the transmission mount. So we took the jack out, and then got the cross member mounted up, and then we took our exhaust, and there's a rubber hanger in the back, there's a rubber hanger right there, and then there's a rubber hanger right here, and this bracket right here, there's 2 bolts on the other side that bolt into the cross member and hold the exhaust up. And then the next step that we're going to do is to mount that exhaust pipe right there. And then after we mount that, we just have to plug the plugs into the transmission, remount the drive shaft, and I believe that's it. Drive away.